The formal education system is in fact a representation of the mainstream society, that it is hierarchical, it's undemocratic in its practices, and the knowledge forms that it is disseminating are really not fully enabling to a lot of people. So within that context, we've been sort of desperately searching for alternatives. We working in Chamarajanagar, some rural youth are trying to look at ways in which we can go beyond formal education to look at how learning can enable individuals, not only enable them in terms of their capacity, enable them to grow individually, but also bring about collective responsibilities. Apart from this, we've also noted a lot of what is happening in rural societies, which I think is, one can generalize for much of India, which is there has been a sharp erosion of local knowledge forms, whether it's agriculture or ecology, medicine, construction. So with this erosion of knowledge, what you see is not only a disabling environment or disabling structures have come into being, but a strong sense of dependency that has been created, where everything needs to come from outside. So within that context, where the outside, the new, the formal is not coming in, there is, and everything that is local has been eroded, you have a sense of deep loss that you see happening everywhere. One of the most striking things we've been observing in the study that we're doing in Chamarajanagar is how in this very remote area, many people just think all agriculture must be conducted with using pesticides or inorganic manure, etc. So even that kind of local knowledge system has been eroded. So within that, linked to that is also what we're observing for much of India is that not only a disembedding of local economies, but attendant with that is the contradiction that local social cultural systems are getting strengthened, cultural sense of belonging to caste groups, to religious groups, or some ways to regional groups, etc. So within that context, what kind of learning is required to not only bring about combined or new hybrid forms of knowledge, but also how do you question these existing forms of structures? How do you bring about new enabling structures that would break all these hierarchical forms that we see? The other issue that has been concerning us and which we are observing is, as many of you know, recently the government has been promulgating a whole regime of rights, whether it's right to education, right to employment, etc. Although these are very enabling, very progressive rights, but most societies, most communities are not able to engage with this. So the absorption capacity of the new regime of rights, new kind of facilities are also not possible. So all of these are happening at a both macro, micro level within our nation and our society, but yet the educational system does not seem to be able to address these questions. So that was the biggest and continues to be the challenge that we face.
We have been brainwashed by the people whose responsibility they want to shirk, and which I call it, this theme runs throughout these 6 modules for the activists, the resource persons, and the 6 modules in 1.5 years throughout in the villages, that what the state has done is it puts the blame on the victims, that you are responsible, you produce more children, you destroy environment, you don't think scientifically, you still follow old methods of agriculture, you don't use scientific agriculture, so you produce less, you are lazy, you didn't go to school, you don't value education. So all the blames are put, and also the victims are victimized. So the first task before us, I consider, and I have succeeded fairly well in all my life, is that first of all we have to get rid of this blame. That we say that the white people called us white man's burden. The yellow colored and the brown colored and the black colored people are white man's burden. But now we know who is burden on who. So that sense has to come. So the first thing has to be there is they need to be disillusioned about the value of the present sort of education. So after that is done, then there is a clean slate, and then I keep saying this, keep reminding them that you think for yourself and come forward. For example, the other discussion that takes place is what is development. What is development? Again, we are totally brainwashed that infrastructural development is development. I asked them that, well, isn't India developing? Everybody says India is developing. Then I asked, okay, India is developing, all right. So, what according to you is development? They come forth and say that everybody should have education, everybody should be healthy, girl children need to be protected, agricultural production should increase, everybody should get a job, and so on and so forth. So all this is happening today, more and more in India. No, nothing of this is happening. But India is developing. So where does this come from? Where this myth comes into our mind as the gospel truth? So that that is questioned. And subsequent to that, then we say that, well, but all is not dark, all is not lost. We have, first, before I go into that last one, another issue to reinforce the feeling of they being somebody, that needs to be established. And one exercise that we do is what is wealth? That thing is discussed. And I see a remarkable difference when I discuss it in the village and I discuss it with students and other educated people. In the village, I say wealth is what we use for our livelihood, which enriches us. They say that. So what are the things? ನೀವು ಶ್ರೀಮಂತರು ಅಂತ ಯಾವಾಗ ಹೇಳ್ತೀರಿ? ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ ಭೂಮಿ ಇರಬೇಕು, we need to have land, house, enough food, enough clothing, shelter, education, arogya, health. So they list it up. Enough water, all that. Money doesn't come when the villagers talk about what is wealth. So that is it. But the educated people, they say money.